In the depths of the ancient ruins, where shadows whispered of forgotten gods and cursed steel, one man, Rifenhardt, would face trials that would shatter both body and spirit. But could even his strength stand against a demon chained by fate itself? Stay with me, because what happens here will change everything. Just like Sillin approached his comrade and asked how tall he was, his eyes lit up when the warrior replied that he was 190 centimeters tall. The saint pressed his hand and asked how he trained to achieve such a body. The fighter said that he had suffered beatings, eaten a lot, and carried heavy things. The boy clasped his hands and remembered that martial artists never revealed their training methods. Rifenhardt imagined the priest looking at the other boys and assumed that he wanted to partake of what he could not receive because of his cute appearance and weak body. The healer's eyes widened. Reality did not live up to his expectations because even diligent training did not help him grow and mature. He only managed to build up divine strength. Rifenhardt covered his chest with his hands when he realized why his comrade was devouring him with his gaze. The boy turned away and decided to go in search of a way out. Sillin said that he would go with him. The boy frowned and asked what would happen if someone got hurt, and he wasn't there. Putting his hand on his belt, Stefan said he would go with him and asked the elf to stay here and help the wounded. The boy approached the guide and asked if he would mind. The warrior replied that he didn't care. The heroes walked down the corridor. Looking at the fighter, the commander decided that he couldn't help but acknowledge the fact that this commoner had helped him, even if it was an accident, and was still outraged by his arrogant tone. The captain smirked, thinking about demonstrating his strength and putting him in his place when the demon showed up. Suddenly, someone hit him in the neck. His body fell to the ground. The martial artist wished him sweet dreams. Several monsters came out from behind him. The undead opened their mouths wide. Rifenhardt immediately crushed their skulls with his fists. Rifenhardt lowered his hands and decided it was time to look at the treasures, now that all the distractions were gone. The door opened in front of him. He raised his hands and noticed that there were many different items from the Silver Age stored here. The bottomless bag glowed. This magical artifact allowed him to carry 10 times more items. The young man took a necklace out of the bag and was glad that there were so many valuable things here. Stefan put his hand to his head and asked what happened. The warrior approached him and explained that he had been hit right in the back of the head, causing him to faint. Frowning, the boy wondered why today was such a terrible day and thanked him for his help. Smiling slyly, the fighter said that he did not need thanks and thought about the fact that he had knocked him out himself. The commander fainted again from the beating. The martial artist hoped that he had not hit him too hard and decided not to pay attention to it, because aristocrats were already living their best life. The captain squinted angrily, surprised that he could not notice anything, and wondered if it was all about him. Rifenhardt realized that he would have to come back for the remaining loot another time. Ivy grew under the ceiling. The guys decided to return to the squad. The soldiers walked forward along the corridor. Sillin approached his comrade and asked if he was a prince, if he had such outstanding abilities. Rifenhardt asked if ordinary people were so rarely outstanding. Looking at him, the saint explained that he was too naturally able to speak condescendingly and was surprised that his comrade allowed himself to talk like that, even to Edward, who was already over 40 years old. The boy narrowed his eyes and remembered that he was only 22 years old now and said that he had forgotten his manners because he rarely met people on his way. The hero stopped in front of a tall door. Stefan went inside. The boy's eyes widened in surprise. The monster opened its mouth and exhaled smoke. The giant demon stuck out its tongue and let out a battle cry. The boy grabbed the sword and decided that this place should have its own guardian. The young man remembered that he had not met him before. The warrior narrowed his eyes and assumed that no one had taken care of him yet. Looking at the monster, the fighter suggested going back because they would not be able to cope with it. The soldier opened his mouth wide and called the leader to look out what this creature was holding in its hands. The monster was clutching the hilt of the demonic sword Alpayan. Edward asked if his comrade was really going to fight him. The commander took out his weapon and asked if it was not obvious. The demon raised its head and opened its mouth. The man shouted that it was too dangerous and suggested returning to the estate to prepare for battle properly. The captain was outraged that Claude's sword was desecrated. Gritting his teeth, the knight realized that he had no right to retreat now and decided to take it from the enemy with a sword at all costs. Stephen raised his sword and called his comrades to arms. The martial artist pursed his lips in displeasure and called him a fool. The monster raised his hand. Inside the spatial rift, there was a system for automatically correcting flaws. When the system failed, protection was triggered that absorbed supernatural monsters. The demon opened his mouth and screamed loudly. The entities that guarded the dungeon were summoned by the system as guards. Rifenhardt frowned and thought that this was the same monster that defeated Claude and increased its level thanks to this. The boy turned and shouted that their enemy was chained and asked if his comrades were afraid of a tied-up enemy. Rifenhardt narrowed his eyes and asked if they really intended to fight the creature, and said they had no chance of winning. Edward smiled and called him a barbarian who knew nothing of a knight's honor, and explained that there were things in this world worth risking one's life for. The soldiers charged. The man urged them to show what they could do. The boy wondered how they were going to kill this monster. Scylan clasped his hands and blessed his comrades. The knights dealt the demon a mighty blow and wished him death. The monster immediately threw them away with one of its clawed paws. The boy frowned in displeasure and said he had warned them that it wouldn't work. The warrior dodged the soldier flying at him. The monster continued to throw the opponents in different directions. The fighter wondered if they really liked it. Stephen swung his sword furiously. The martial artist mentally called him a fool and was surprised that Edward was still trying to help him. The boy lunged forward and jumped. He managed to strike the enemy. The saint put his fingers together and asked Philonance to turn his holy staff on this evil entity. Bright energy fell on the demon. The skeleton opened his mouth wide. The priest asked him to release his holy staff. A powerful explosion of holy energy was heard in front of the monster. Lelsia jumped into the air above his head. The knights attacked the enemy at once. Crossing his arms over his chest, Rifenhardt called the elf quite talented and thought about singling her out as number 2 in this squad. Todd raised his hands and cast the spell. A huge whirlwind appeared in front of him. Streams of mana flowed along the walls of the dungeon. Suddenly they caught fire. The chains were covered in flames. The monster broke free from its bonds. Rifenhardt gritted his teeth and realized that things were bad for them. The monster lunged forward. Its powerful host crushed several soldiers. The frantic demon pounced on the knights. The commander raised his sword above his head and wished him death. The monster punched him in the stomach. Blood gushed from the captain's mouth. The man opened his mouth in fear and called out to him. Stephen clutched his chest. The nobleman was glad that he was okay. Elsia ran forward. The girl jumped up and did a somersault in the air. She dealt several consecutive blows to the enemy. The woman swung her sword, her face tense. Flames ignited in the monster's mouth. A wave of fire rushed forward. The soldiers immediately jumped back in different directions. They had to fall to the ground to dodge. Scylan spread his arms as the explosion occurred right next to him. The boy opened his mouth in fear. His pupils narrowed. The boy covered it with his body at the last moment. The wave of fire split in two and passed them by. The young man clenched his fist and apologized for not being able to react in time. The demon squatted in front of him. The warrior frowned and decided that he could handle it. Energy flared up around him. He himself wondered what the limit of his current strength was and whether martial arts could help in the fight against such creatures. The fighter clenched his fist and decided that the times when he was a magician were already gone. Confidently knitting his eyebrows, the martial artist felt goosebumps all over his body from the sight of such a strong opponent, and declared that he had come a long way to become so strong. Rifenhardt dealt his opponent 2 powerful blows. Rifenhardt leaned back to avoid the blow. The boy frowned and was surprised that this body could easily dodge a normal sword, but the demon was still able to scratch him. The boy found himself behind the enemy. The monster's tail left several cuts on his arm. The monster kicked him with its hoof. The saint's mouth opened in horror when the warrior crashed into the wall. The fighter scratched the back of his head and said that he was fine. The healer's eyes widened in surprise and wondered if this was the power of the aura. After stretching his neck, the martial artist realized that he would have had a chance to counterattack if he had withstood the blow, and decided to use the opportunity to polish his technique. The demon opened its mouth wide and roared. They entered into close combat. Stephen's mouth opened in amazement. Watching the battle from the sidelines, the commander wondered how a lowly commoner could wield the aura when even he could not awaken it. The captain clenched his teeth and asked how this was even possible. The monster bared its teeth in rage. The knight frowned in fear and wondered what kind of person this was. Rifenhardt swung his fist and dealt a powerful blow. He barely dodged the enemy's attack. The guy grinned, feeling what incredible strength he had managed to develop over all this time. With one blow, the young man tore off the monster's arm. The demon's eyes lit up. The guardians of the ruins did not fall even after serious injuries, because the dungeon endlessly pumped mana into them. Waves of energy ran through the body of the beast. The monster opened its mouth and spewed flames. The warrior lunged forward to dodge. The martial artist grabbed the enemy by the arm to practice the hold. Rifenhardt kicked the monster in the face. He grinned and dealt a series of blows. Rifenhardt, his eyes burning, beat the enemy. The soldiers watched their fight from the side. Squinting, the boy realized that he had gotten carried away and thought about using the Horn of Disaster to finish it all off in one go. The demon swung its hoof. The boy realized that he couldn't use his skill because otherwise the whole place would collapse. The warrior gritted his teeth when Todd asked him to use his sword and cover it with aura. The fighter turned around and shouted that he didn't know how to do it. The man asked what that meant. The martial artist frowned and said that he could only cover the body with aura because that was the teaching of their clan. Sillin opened his mouth wide and called out to him. Holding back the paws of the monster, Rifenhardt turned around. The boy remembered that his body had high durability. Rifenhardt gritted his teeth and confirmed it. The saint put his fingers together and decided to cast a binding. The boy opened his eyes wide as the blessing of Philonance fell on his body. The boy clenched his teeth with intention. He managed to throw the monster over himself. The warrior released its paws and threw it aside. The fighter grabbed his hand and realized that his comrade had used a divine spell, not on an object, but on a human body. The healer closed his eyes and asked his friend to beat this monster to death. The martial artist ran forward to quickly finish this. He kicked the monster in the jaw. Then Rifenhardt hit it with his knees. Rifenhardt swung his fist furiously. During the attack, a huge amount of energy burst out of him. The demon's body flew into the air. An explosion of aura was heard. One blow tore the monster into pieces. The wizard blushed when he saw his friend, who had just won. Mana flowed under the ceiling. Suddenly, her chain went out. Sillin opened his mouth in surprise and asked if that was all. Rifenhardt asked him to quickly remove the spell. Stefan then approached him, gritting his teeth. The boy claimed that their guide was doing a good job of hiding his identity and asked if they were really that insignificant to him. The commander looked at him from under his brows and said that he would never forgive him for trampling on his honor, and suggested that he was enjoying watching their fight from the sidelines. The boy narrowed his eyes and denied this, thinking that it meant he cared about what was happening. But that was not the case. The warrior turned away silently, and the captain asked how he dared to turn his back on him. The knight wanted to attack him, but the fighter ducked and raised the demonic sword. Stefan suddenly tripped and was unable to stay on his feet. The boy rolled down the rubble of the dungeon. The commander gritted his teeth and decided that the guide had dodged on purpose. Raising the sword, the martial artist said that he was not trying to mock him and asked him to take what they came for. The captain grabbed the demonic sword. Edward was surprised that this man was so careless with such a precious thing and said that such were the privileges of the truly strong. Rifenhardt raised his eyebrows and thought that this weapon was second class compared to the one he usually used. The captain frowned furiously. Rifenhardt suggested returning to the village because there was nothing else to see here. In the depths of the ancient ruins, where shadows whispered of forgotten gods and cursed steel, one man, Rifenhardt, would face trials that would shatter both body and spirit. But could even his strength stand against a demon chained by fate itself? Stay with me, because what happens here will change everything.